we do a quick 30 seconds, 60 seconds intro to talk about your background and your passion. So Bharat, would you like to start first?
Yeah, so let me tell you my background. I have a variety of experience. I worked for a systems integrator. It's a company called Syntel way back. Actually, I started my career in Tata Unisys. I don't know, many of you remember Tata Unisys. It finally merged with TCS. So it was the TCS in Tata Unisys. I started as a programmer, left them, joined a company in the US on their sales side, went to business school, did consulting, did two startups. One was my own. It was an ASP, which we're calling SaaS now. It is basically software on a subscription basis. We're too early to market. You don't have broadband, ubiquity of broadband. You don't have bandwidth. Did that, and then I spent 15 plus years in Microsoft doing a variety of functions from product management to services, to channel work. It's basically what we call as the small and mid-sized businesses. That's all channel driven. And then did a short stint at AWS and got recruited by Autodesk about 3 years ago to run their channel business. So that's a little bit about me. I'm based here in Singapore.
Fantastic. And Bharat, I think in terms of the geography, you have very strong experience in Asia Pacific, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's Asia Pacific excluding Japan. I mean, though I've run a stint in Japan, it's definitely, if anybody tells you you can do APJ Japan inclusive sitting out of Singapore, then you've got to take that with a pinch of salt. Yeah.
Right. And what is your relationship with the startup ecosystem at the moment? Are you?
It's just, no, I mean, there are a few startups and that have been that reach out to me on and off, asking, just to bounce ideas off. I'm not on formal mentor to any startup as yet. Right?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Sounds great, Bharat. Really appreciate the intro. I would request John to do a quick intro about himself.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everybody. So I would call myself a customer success experience and engagement leader, mainly working for high-tech MNCs. I've been working in Asia Pacific for 25 years plus. I actually started my career in Japan. So I've managed teams across the full customer lifecycle. So everything from pre-sales, systems engineering, consulting, training services, customer success, and technical support. So my passion is building high-performance, customer-focused tech teams. So my passion is, right now it's customer success, customer experience. I'm currently working for RedHat, where I lead the customer experience and engagement team, covering what we call the growth and emerging markets, which is mainly ASEAN and Korea. Although my experience is across all of APAC, so I've worked in most of the major markets throughout the region.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, John. Really appreciate your intro. Now, I would like to start with one question, which is probably applicable to both of your past professional life, right? When startups try to sell to enterprises, right? It's completely different ball game, and selling to the enterprises is not that simple, right? And especially when it comes to startups selling to the enterprises, it could be very complicated, right? So from your perspective, from your team's perspective, what kind of challenges you have seen while selling to the enterprises? So I'll start with you, John.
Yeah, I mean, we mainly focus on enterprise customers, and for my team, we're really about understanding the customer's desired business outcomes. So less about selling product and features, but more in terms of understanding what business challenges or problems our customers are trying to solve, and the role that our products can play in providing solutions to that. So it's very much an outcomes-based consultative approach. So that's the recommendation that we would make. Don't be so overly focused on selling your product and features, but really try to understand your ideal customer profile, and and to make sure you have focus, and then to have the consultative outcome focused approach.
So you always focus on not selling the product, but solving the real problems of the customers by offering your solution, right? So
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I mean, for my team, we consist of customer success managers and technical account managers. So we're kind of like post sales. So we're very much involved in ensuring that we get expansion, selling, upsell, cross sell, and the renewal sale. So we need to understand, what is the outcome that the customer wants to achieve, and we engage throughout the customer life cycle. So everything from onboarding to adoption through dealing with any deployment issues they have, and then up to renewals and expansion. So very much, that to us, customer success is customer outcomes plus customer experience.
interesting. Bharat, what is your perspective on the challenges with enterprise?
So let me just start with let's just go back to the basics from a startup perspective, right? So most of you are in early stage incubation. How do you go to how do you go to an enterprise? Who knows of I forget the name of the payment company. I think I know the
Taurus Advisors.
Kirill, right? And who's going to give you your open the door for you to go and talk to DBS Bank, right? I mean, it's so you leverage your VC, you leverage your connections, and at the end of the day, you as a founder are making the pitch yourself, right? And then what John mentions kind of makes sense, right? It's where we are. In fact, we are training our channel now to do this outcome-based selling. So you go in there, and the first mistake a lot of founders make is because they are so excited and passionate about their product and their solution that they'll talk about the product and solution, and that's the fallacy. That's something where a lot of startups, that's you go in there and you make that mistake. This is one chance you have got because through your connections you got the meeting with head of, let's say, digital transformation, or head data scientist in a bank, right? You've got that meeting, and you've got that meeting through the connection. So you go there, and I think the main thing is to understand what are you solving, what is the customer pain point you are addressing, right? And there's a simple, it's a very simple accounting equation, right? It's profit is equal to revenue minus cost. Okay, so whatever solution you are trying to pitch, okay, at the end of the day, either it has to bring the revenues up or the cost down, and either directly or indirectly, right? So indirectly, cost down could be better customer retention, right? Maybe it's hard to quantify, right? But it's quantified, right? At the end of the day, you've got to hit that, right? To me, the biggest challenges, in startups is this who's going to give you the time of the day, right? Because like yourself, there are 50 startups lining up with different solutions that they want to offer. And let's be, I mean, I've been through this myself. So your first, big deals are going to come. The few big deals, you may even give away your software for free, right? Or give them a really, a great deal, or ask them to be your pilot. The idea is you land those marquee accounts. You land those marquee accounts with the work that you do as a founder yourself, because you know the product the best. Okay, and then after that, you've landed those. Obviously, you want a reference from them, and the reference it takes many forms. It takes it's a written reference, video, but nothing more important than that customer willing to pick up the phone and say, yes, I've implemented this solution. This is awesome. It really does these things. Okay, that's what you want to get at. If you're giving away your software for free, okay, you better get that at least. Yeah. Okay. So then I'll stop after that. So then after that, it's like, how do you scale? As a founder, you're doing fundraising. You're watching the product. Okay. And by the way, you're doing fundraising all year round. Okay, don't make no mistakes that you think the fundraising is done. You're constantly speaking to VCs for the next round, because you want to be looking for money when you actually don't need the money, right? Sorry, Pankaj, I'm saying this, but that's so you're doing that. You're looking at the product. You're hiring, right? So you're trying to do multiple. So at some point, you say, okay, I got to hire somebody. Then so what do you do next? You go hire, somebody. So I'm giving you the B2B context. You go hire, a mid-level exec or a rock star from a Salesforce or Adobe or Microsoft or somebody, and you bring him or her as vice president of sales. Largely what they're doing is you are buying a Rolodex, essentially, right? These people have strong relationships, okay? So now they can help you. They have the relationships. They will, open the door. So that's typically how you start. Then it comes down to, so you have hired this thing. You have money from the VCs. You've got to get to reduce your burn, but at the same time, you've got to add customers, right? So then what's the next step? So how much money are you going to spend on expanding that individual's team, right? So there's a balance between that and say, hey, how do I start looking at the channel? So I'm going to stop there because I think I spoke a lot. Okay.
No, that's pretty interesting. So I'm going to ask more questions on the channels because that could be pretty crucial for the startups. But let me go to John. He touched upon ICP, Ideal Customer Profile. So I would like to understand from John how you define ICP at Red Hat, or why the ICP is so important for any kind of enterprise sales. Could you please talk about your experience?
Yeah, for us, from a customer success perspective, the ICP is basically the perfect customer for what our organization is trying to solve for. So you could say it's somewhat of a fictitious customer that has all the qualities that your product is the best fit for. And you might have multiple ICPs for different products within your product portfolio. So it's a clear idea on what type of customer you're going to be successful with your product. So it's kind of like the sweet spot, the perfect customer. So for us, you look at we focus on the problem that your business is trying to solve. You review your customer journey map. So the customer journey is, from over the customer life cycle, from when they first get into your product to actually deploying it and realizing the value. And obviously looking at customer feedback and things like that to make sure that you are actually meeting your ICP. And I think it's important that, especially for startups, is that you might get distracted and get deviated from what your ICP started off on and trying to, there's a good opportunity. So if you deviate from your planned ICP, you need to have, it needs to be a conscious decision that you're going off and you're making that deviation for a purpose, but it should be an anchor for which you can, reference in terms of the type of customers that you're going after.
I see. And interestingly, I mean, when startups are at the pre-seed or seed stage, when they just did a couple of pilots and they are trying to, convert those pilot customers to the production customer, they might not be highly confident. They might not be highly certain about the ICP, right? And at that time, obviously, they'll be experimenting with a couple of different kind of profiles. And based on those experimentation, based on the value that they are creating for different kind of customer profiles, then they will try to define or try to nail down the ICP.
Sure, yeah, it could be an iterative process, So based on like trial and error, customer feedback, and then doing some exercises like customer journey mapping. So mapping out who are your personas and how they fit in, how they use your product, and you're mapping it out. So looking at your demographics, so working with your marketing team. So you may not have, for early on stage, you may not have it completely locked in. So that I would imagine there will be some fine tuning in the initial stages.
Understood. So from your perspective, doing all this trial and error, doing all this experimentation is completely fine, as long as you are getting the right feedback from the customer. You are really understanding what problems you are solving, what is the quantifiable, value proposition, who are the personas, and things of that nature.
Yeah, okay. So long as you're converging on a decision point in
Understood.
time.
Understood.
Yeah.
And generally, how much time it takes for an organization like Red Hat to converge to a decision, and what would be your opinion for the startups? How much time it may take?
Well, the answer to that is it really depends. I mean, RedHat is a pretty mature organization,
Right.
so we're more our product portfolio is more like a evolution than revolution. So yeah, as we're going into new areas, maybe for some of our newer products, yeah, I mean, it could be like 12 to 18 months. But we
For the
have
new
a lot of resources and industry know-how, so a little bit different from a pure startup.
No, that makes complete sense. And just a comment for the audience, obviously feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions. Obviously turn on your video as well when you are asking questions, that John and Bharat know who is asking what questions. Yeah, okay. Thanks a lot, John, for your insights on ICP. Let me turn to Bharat now, and let me ask him about the channel. So Bharat, one thing that we as a EthAum and our portfolio startups have realized is that getting foot in the door at particular enterprise customer could be quite difficult. You might have email ID, you might know the person, but even then, getting a response or getting a meeting with the right relevant people to do the demonstration of the product could be quite complicated, right? And in that cases, probably channels could play a very crucial, important role in getting foot in the door. What is your opinion on the channels? How do we find them? How do we utilize them? How do we create incentives for the channels?
So it's a big, huge topic, and I can do a whole session on just incentives by itself, right? But really, there are a couple of things. Okay, so if you see, first of all, you've got to be convinced that you're going to need the channel, right? And I say this because different. If you see these different companies, whether it's Microsoft or it's one end of the extreme, and then you have AWS and you have Salesforce on the other side. And I'll tell you why. So Microsoft's DNA was channel, right? Because it started with Windows. Windows was on PCs, okay? PCs got sold through distribution, through hardware vendors. So Microsoft's DNA was there. From there, so it was always channel centric, okay? And Microsoft realizes and then realized then that, that's crucial for our go-to-market. If you look at AWS or even Salesforce, they came from, and actually more so AWS, they came from direct selling to the developers and the sysadmins, right, in the IT, right? And then they realized, okay, I've got to scale up, I've got to sell up into the in the organization, and so if you go to see the history, their channel programs came much after, okay, and that's when their revenues really accelerated, right? So then the question is, how do you find the right channel, right? And here there are a couple of, you got to see that there are different channel players. When I say channel, you have a T1 model where you have now what they call as cloud service providers, who basically have APIs built in and to the vendor, and they are able to provide the customer a single portal for all their billings and provisioning. Okay, you also have T2. T2 players is your traditional distribution channel. So you have Ingram and Synnex and ECS and Tech Data and the likes that will do more on the broader side, depending on what your solution is, right? So, for example, for Kirill's company, Kirill, and I remember his name as opposed to his company's name, for him, it's more of an enterprise sale, right? And I remember Kirill because Kirill was, he was the CEO of Citrix, okay? And he was also a Microsoft senior exec. That's what I remember. So for him, I mean, it's not a T2 model. It's a T1 model, right? T1 model. So who are the cloud service providers, right? That work in the enterprise space, okay? And for you, it's more on the financial services side, right? The second, that's one side. The second is systems integrators. Now, the interesting thing about systems integrators is you have these global players, you have the regional players, and you have the local players, right? So, for example, here in Singapore, your regional player would be an NCS, heavy in the public sector. You have the GSI, all the GSIs are here. You name it, Accenture, blah blah blah, all of them, right? The challenge with working with these large GSIs or global system integrators is it is a time suck. Okay, it's a time suck. Number one, they are huge, and you got to navigate the bureaucracy. Okay, but then to any systems integrator or to any partner, at the end of the day, how do they make money selling your solution, right? And this is where it comes down to where the model has changed. You know, in the past, a partner, say a channel partner, made money through three ways. They sold hardware, and there was, you know, a little bit of margin in the front end, and then you got the rebates from the vendors. You sold software, same thing, front end and back end, and then of course, you know, services was kind of thrown in, right? Now in this world today of the SaaS world, it's all gone, right? I mean, there's no hardware essentially. Okay, your software is not a perpetual license sale that you sold up front. It's a subscription, right? That it's an annuity based revenue stream that you're getting, and for which these partners and even vendors realize that you need a customer success organization. 30 years ago there was no customer success organization because it was all perpetual largely, right? I think the companies that mastered it was Salesforce, right? So finally it comes down to how does a partner make money selling your SaaS solution, right? And it comes down to services. What is the services opportunity, right? And if you are able to articulate that, right? And so the beauty of a SI is, for example, let me take, and I'll tell you from my industry, right? So the big thing now is digitization of the workplace. Okay, the digitalization of the workplace initiative is a big thing, especially because of the COVID situation, and that's driven a lot of that, right? So what is an SI doing? SI, there's no one vendor that's able to meet all the needs and to provide a complete solution. There isn't one. So what they do is they have different vendors. They're working with different vendors, right? So you've got to understand where your solution fits in, right? Where does your solution fit in the bigger realm of things? Okay, if it's a standalone solution, okay, and there's not a whole lot of services revenue, okay, the SI is not going to be interested. SIs don't care about front end, back end. Okay, let me tell you, I don't know how many of you know that AWS does not pay any front end margin or back end margin. Yet there's a line of systems integrators waiting to work with AWS. And the reason for that is because AWS provides the building blocks. They see a huge services revenue opportunity. So the point I'm trying to get at is, for each of the startups, your value prop is different. You got to figure out how does it fit into the bigger initiative that a company is trying to drive, right? And then you typically have a SI, whether it's local, regional, that's going to be working with them, right? And that's where you start engaging those specific ones, right? So that's how and it's basically brute force. You got to do a lot of research. You got to see who are the CSPs. And one thing is, if your solution is complementary to a Microsoft, that's pretty easy. Most of these places are pretty easy. You go and look up who's the CSPs, and then you have a conversation. Now, the second part is the T2. The T2 places got interesting, right? Because your traditional distributor is a distributor carrying about 200 vendor products, right? They sell hardware, software. They bundle things. They'll do Cisco routers, printer. And of course we throw in a Microsoft Office, right? So now what's happened is, as the vendors move to the SaaS, they realize that they needed to change their models too. Okay, so they've kind of built, I'd say, quote unquote, marketplaces. And I call it marketplaces because what they've done is, like for example, for Ingram, right? So think of the pain point that they're solving for a customer. A customer has 15 SaaS products. Okay, are they going to go to 15 different portals to go and provision and and manage the billing, right? So there are these distributors, right? Like Tech Data and Ingram, I know for a fact that they have this kind of a marketplace for SaaS vendors, right? And the value prop for the end customer is that, hey, you have a single pane for managing all your SaaS, provisioning and managing your SaaS solutions, right? So now that's again going into the T2. T2 is the next stage, right? You'll see most startups in the startups journey, unless you're B2C, okay. Typically, you start from the enterprise space, right? Unless it's a pure, massive marketplace for smaller collaborations, right? And you're on that journey, you'll start at the enterprise, and the enterprise you'll start first with yourself, and then you hire, a senior leader, and then you start engaging your, key channel partners. And I'm not putting a label whether it's systems integrator or it's an Ingram, depending on your solution, right? So the channel comes, I would say, slightly later, because you gotta have proof of more than proof of concept. You gotta know that this makes money, right? Because if you're asking a partner to make investments in selling a solution, they got to train their people first, okay, both technical and sales. You are consuming their bandwidth to sell your solution, right? It becomes easier if it's a complementary to a broader solution, whether it's a smart city or digitization of the workplace, or some of these initiatives, right? Does that kind of help answer?
Interesting. So I think what you have mentioned is that obviously there are different kind of distributors, but as a startup, even if you have the paid pilot, if you have the revenue customers who are giving you the recurring revenue, you need to figure out how you fit into the bigger thing, the larger things that this particular distributor is trying to do.
And if you actually look at it other way, I'll tell you one thing. Always start with the customer pain point. Okay, always start there. Like one of the problems, you start and work backwards from there. Right. So if you start from there, one of the things you'll realize is that I'm a customer. I mean, I've got you selling me something. I've got, Salesforce. I got like 7-8 different, so of course, now you have these managed service providers who there's a whole business managing everything for you in the cloud. But not everybody is using a managed service provider. Right. So the pain point was, hey, how do I manage this multi SaaS vendor environment? And so what they did then was built out this cloud. I don't know, I forget the name that Ingram uses, right? This platform to do that. So that's what it is. So don't start at the distributor, don't start at the channel level. Start at the end customer. What is the pain point from a management perspective, right? This is a different lens, right? And of course, it comes down again to costs, right? And cost, it may not be directly, it's productivity, right? You think of somebody who's trying to manage 8 vendors, and then and you have 800 users, so it quickly adds up the number of provisioning you have to manage, right? So that's the thing. I think my guidance to the startups is see where you are complementary to a broader solution that the customer is looking to solve, right? Because then there will be interest from the channel.
That makes sense. So complementary solution.
Yeah.
Pretty important. Okay. That makes sense. So thanks a lot, Bharat, for your insights on the channels. Now I would go back to John to talk about the collaborative success plan. So when I was having discussion with John mentioned that, hey, it is very important to create that collaborative success plan with the customers, right? So I know John has some great insights on that.
Yeah, so I guess the success plan is the most important document that our customer success managers work on with their customers in collaboration. So it's not like an account plan which is inside out and more on, this is the revenue I want to achieve with the customer. This is very much outside in, consultative, collaborative approach with how can we work with the customers to enable them to be successful. So what are the objectives that they're trying to achieve? What are the key challenges that they're likely to face? What are the key benefits that they hope to obtain from using our product or services? And then setting some milestones and actions and dates. So not like a task list, but key milestones along the customer journey in order to get them from the initial onboarding through adoption, deployment, and then to, starting to get in value from their investment in our product. And then working with them to define what success looks like. So how do we know that they've actually obtained value, that they're actually successful? How do we measure that? So working with them on getting the KPIs. And obviously this is not a one time, it's it's an iterative and it's a fine-tuned process, but it's something that you develop and fine-tune along the customer journey. And and your customer success plan can be, it can happen in phases. So when you get your first type of value, then as you grow with the customer and your customer becomes successful and therefore you become successful, you can identify new opportunities or new challenges or issues that they want to get resolved using your product, and that could either spawn different success plans or develop the existing success plan.
In your opinion, what is the right time frame to create that success plan? Is it right?
The earlier the better. Yeah. So because it's not like the most important, you need to understand what the problem is the customer is trying to achieve and how your solution and our service is going to solve that. So as soon as you meet the customer for the first time, you're taking a consultative approach and asking open-ended questions. What is it you're hoping to achieve? How can we help? How can we work together? And that's when you start, just when you start writing the document, and then, as it's collaborative, then you can develop it in time. So the earlier, the better, obviously. Yeah.
Understood. And when you are creating that success plan, obviously there are success of the entity, right, of the customer, and success of the person with whom you are working in that organization, right? Because obviously every person in an organization have goals and objectives that they want to achieve. So
well, this is more focused on the business outcome. So what does success look in terms of, why are they making the investment in your product and solution? What is the value that they hope to achieve? So it's very much the business to business perspective.
Okay, not focusing on the personal goals and objectives of that particular individual.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would expect that my CSM's personal goals should be aligned to the customer success as well as the stakeholders' personal objectives and OKRs should be also aligned to their company's OKRs. So it would be a subset of, so there would be some relationship, I would imagine. But yeah, it's focused on the high level business outcome.
Understood. That is interesting.
You have a different perspective?
Go ahead, please.
No, did you have a different perspective on that, or what you're thinking on why it would be? Obviously, if it depends on who, if the stakeholder is the company, then obviously there would be a closer correlation. So if you're dealing with small companies, but if you're dealing with large enterprises, then you need to look at it from the bigger view. So it kind of depends on who the end customer is and the different, where the stakeholder fits in with the the business objectives.
And another thing is that when we are selling to, let's say, reasonable size enterprise, there could be probably 3-4 different stakeholders, right? So when you create the success plan, you onboard all these 3-4 different stakeholders in the meeting and then create the success plan with them, or you just talk to one main stakeholder and work with that person?
Well, in our customer journey mapping, we identify different personas and what are the key things that matter to them. But obviously we take it and we would mainly focus on the key decision makers, the key stakeholders, and understanding is, so what does success look like for the company? So when they say, so who's paying the bill? Say, okay, did Red Hat deliver on value? Who's going to determine that based on what success criteria?
Understood. Okay. Bharat, do you have any opinion on that, on the success plan?
No, the reason I smiled was because this is the classic mistake companies make, that they think the success plan comes 90 days before a renewal is due, right? It's true, right? Because then it's not a customer success plan. Okay, then it's basically your renewal plan, and by then, if the customer has not realized, if there's no usage, there's no consumption, right, of thing, they're not going to renew, right? And I'll tell you my experiences from so, and I think at Red Hat too, comes from that side, right? Because both these companies, at Microsoft and Red Hat, came from a perpetual license world, right? Where you actually sold a license, sold a maintenance contract, and then came back. It was like for a resource enterprise agreement, you come back after 3 years, or for smaller customers, it was at the hardware refresh cycle, right? And say, hey, I'm here, let's, and then you sign and go away, right? Well, subscription doesn't work that way, right? Because subscription is an annual renewal, right? And if you're not driving consumption, which is basically usage of your subscription, okay, then you're not going to get renewal. And so it's basically managing that whole cycle from the time you actually sign up, right, to getting the your credentials set up, to driving usage, to making sure that the customer is using, that you're sending tips and tricks about, hey, this is the way you can do a few other things, right? And I think John can talk better to that. You manage that whole thing really well, you would get a good renewal rate. I tell you, in the best-in-class SaaS companies, anything about a renewal rate of below 95% is considered like a red flag, right? It's like a red on your KPI, right? And you can only drive that by having a robust customer success organization. So those guys, to all of you startups, I think my message is, if you're in a SaaS play, if you're in a subscription base, you've got to have, I think, and especially for your marquee customers that it's been so painful to go and get, and then it would be a shame if you lose them because they've not maximized the use out of the of your solution, right? So yeah.
Just one thing. Sorry, just one thing to point out. Yeah, so Red Hat is 100% a subscription-based model. We're open source software, so customers would have a choice to get open source software for free, but our value is actually in what we provide in our subscription. So it's the enterprise ready, it's the security, it's the patches, it's the support, the documentation, etc. So we're very much focused on ensuring they get value throughout the customer life cycle.
And one thing that I have realized is that most of the times when startups are selling their solution, they are talking about their product, they are talking about the solution, they are talking about the value proposition. But it's very rare that a startup goes into the meeting and talks about the customer success plan. It doesn't happen. And when you are starting your meeting with the customer with customer success plan, I think you create that differentiation right in the beginning, that, hey, we are not here to sell the product and make money out of you. We are here to create a collaborative success plan and to ensure that everybody is successful, right? Mm-hmm. Which is pretty interesting. That's a very, very interesting topic. Any questions from the audience on this topic?
Yeah, I have one. Yeah. So again, about the right timing of starting the discussions around success plan. If, for example, in our case, so we're a pretty young startup in quite a new market, and we're from different geographies. So probably when we come in, we should create some kind of first some impression, I would say. So if we kind of nobody and starting discussing potential success plan for the customer, so they should have a reason to believe us. For some of the reasons, so that's one of a comment I would say.
Yeah, so, I guess if you've done your homework and you've done some research on the company and some of the challenges that you think they face, and you start asking the right types of questions, open questions from day one, say, oh, they actually know a bit about our company, how we're operating. They kind of have some understanding of some of the challenges that we face. Maybe they have a solution that can solve these problems for us. So it's doing that research up front. So it's not going in and it's assuming you know nothing about the company. Obviously, you have to do your background and research. And if you can go in and asking the right questions, then you can be seen as a trusted advisor, which is ultimately, you want to be seen as a trusted advisor, a subject matter expert that's going to solve their business challenges.
Okay, thanks.
Interesting.
Makes sense, yeah.
Any other question? Okay. Any question on the ICP or on the channels? Okay. I don't think there's any question at the moment.
Are any of the startups using a subscription model, or what's their go-to-market, strategy? I'm curious. Have they figured that out yet?
So our target one is actually the subscription model. Yeah. So, but we started with pilots with some POCs. So first, as the thing we're doing is not something familiar typically to our customers. So that's why we at first sight we'd like to demonstrate some value. So indeed, this is something that is valuable. And then, okay, as a next step, let's widen the scope and go into some subscription base.
So when you do your POCs, then you can do a mini success plan for those, because you can start talking about what does success look like? How do we know that we're we have a potential solution and so forth. So it can be a mini success plan that can set the stage.
We try to do that. Yeah. So we do not call it success plan at this moment, but we try to touch point the pain points and what are the potential KPIs they might be interested in out of these POCs.
Good. Okay.
Okay. Shai, I know that Intentify is also highly focused on the subscription model. I don't know if Shai wants to mention anything at the moment.
Yes,
Shai,
we usually sell a license for 3 months, and once we see a success, then we extend to additional 1 year.
Fantastic. Now let me ask you another question on finding the influencers or stakeholders while selling to the enterprises, because I think that is also pretty crucial, right? If you don't know who are the decision makers, if you don't know who could influence the decision making, then probably you're wasting your time. So how do you define that process while selling to the enterprises? Bharat, could you please start?
So again, it comes. So you're actually spot on, right? Because traditionally, a lot of folks have got stuck in selling to the IT department, right? Because they had the budgets, and there was this perception that they were the decision makers. The reality is there's been a huge shift. If you read any of the Gartner reports or any, I think right now it's anywhere between 60 to 70% of the entire IT budget resides with the business units, right? It's not okay. So yes, there will be the IT department will be involved in the technical evaluation of the product from a security and all that perspective, right? But the key decision maker is the business user, and this comes back to the first point that John mentioned. Okay, what is the outcome or pain point you're trying to drive, and for whom? Right. So, for example, Kirill's example, if I remember, his value prop was you're trying to maximize the portfolio, okay, or the credit card portfolio of a bank. Okay. So, who's the head of the consumer credit card division in the bank? That's the person. That's the decision maker. That's the individual's pain point you're trying to solve, because you're impacting his or her P&L directly, right? So there's this whole, you've got to build an account map, right? You've got to build an account map to say, let's say you're going to target DBS Bank. A lot of the information today is publicly available, right? So, so at least, you can look at the 10K, which will give you, a broad sense. Sometimes, you even have it on the websites, and then, you can kind of build it through LinkedIn, right? But you got to have that map, right? So you're talking to the right person, or, right, if so the head of consumer banking may not know the head of credit cards, but somebody who knows the head of lending. I'm just making that, right? Who's the peer of this individual, right? So, but it's important when you look at enterprise, you have to build that account map, okay? Who are the key stakeholders? I mean, it's a different key stakeholders. But at the end of the day, ask yourself, whose pain point are you solving? It's not the IT's pain point, right? Why am I talking to IT about my solution, right?
Right.
And quite honestly, most of the budget now doesn't even reside with IT, especially on the business solutions, right? I mean, that is with the business decision makers now. So that's how you would do it. And I tell you, it's easier said than done because typically technology in the past has been sold to IT, right? And it's easier for a technologist to have a conversation with IT, especially if you don't understand the business, right? You're not the expert in the domain in that specific industry, right? And therefore, I mean, this happened, almost 20 years ago, where companies had specific domain experts, right? And the goal, so Oracle has a whole special pre-sales team of ex-consultants coming from the industry who have this business value outcome-based discussion with the business decision makers only. Okay, they're not talking to IT. This is pre-sales. Okay, but it comes back to, so if you're going to talk to the head of credit, right, you better know about the credit card business, right, and what is the pain point, right? So that's how you would, that's how we've approached. So that's how we've kind of trained our salespeople to go after. And believe me, it's not still a journey, right? The problem with, so let me tell you, a problem with a lot of the partners is because they've been selling all hardware and this and that, they're selling to IT. Okay, yeah, and so therefore selection. I mean, so we have that challenge today in Autodesk, right? Yeah, and then how do you have this outcome-based conversation? The ones that are experts at it are the SIs, right? I mean, because they're not selling products. I mean, they're looking to solve a business problem. Right? So
that's an interesting point. So definitely talking to more and more SIs and trying to understand how we can bundle our solution with their solution or with their, can we go with them would be really crucial. Okay. John, what is your opinion on the stakeholders?
Yeah, it depends where you are in the customer journey. Yeah, as Bharat said, if it's the pre-sales biz dev part, then that might be a different group of stakeholders that you need to engage with early on and understanding their pain points and the benefits that they're looking for and the problems they're looking to get solved. Then when you're later on the customer journey, when you're looking at the renewals, might be the focus might turn to a different group of stakeholders. Typically we run into the actual users, making sure have they been getting value in from the solution. Obviously it goes to the purchasing department to want to sign off. So across the customer journey, you need to identify who are the key persona, who are the key stakeholders, and what level of decision making they have for each stage. Then what was the other point? I guess that, I mean, we do use target account selling approach. The other considerations you need to make is understanding who are your advocates, who are your nemesis promoters, who's going to champion your solution, or who might have a preference for a competitor and things like that. There are also things that you would need to consider.
Fantastic. I think Shai has a question.
Yeah, so just to get your perspective, we are doing sales of 50K deals. How it will change when we go up to 500 in terms of PO approval, etc.
is that a question for me or for?
So I think we can take it one by one. So,
both, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so okay, it varies, right? It varies from an organization. So 50K, okay, yeah. So you're doing 50Ks. It's probably, so each decision maker has certain, signing authority, right? In an organization. So 500K for, I tell you, for a company in Southeast Asia, that might go into tender. Okay, so they may have to, they may have to issue a tender, right?
Not only in Asia, I think, also in the US and other places.
Yeah. I mean, so and then of course then it comes back to this whole point of who are all the stakeholders, right? So now you have actually purchasing involved also, right? So the purchasing is also the purchasing, stakeholders are the ones who are actually calling the tender, right? So you now have purchasing, you have your business decision maker, you have IT, and depending on the size, it may require 3 signatories. Okay, once the deal is, when the tender has been awarded, it's a long. I mean, I shouldn't say long. It is a drawn out process, right? It's not as easy. Okay. Now I'm seeing this limits getting higher and higher to streamline the purchasing. So for us, I've seen it at Autodesk. I mean, we have $100,000 deals going through our direct, the Autodesk.com, whatever our portal is, right? So it varies by country. But back to your point, I tell you, it's worth the effort. Okay, but it's not a 15-day close cycle. Okay. No, I think John, you can add.
Yeah, similar kind of thoughts. Yeah, it depends on the size of the company you're working with, but obviously, the 500K would definitely go out for tender. But maybe you can influence how that's documented if you're talking to the right people, so that you're the best solution.
Interesting.
Yeah. So if you know who's writing the tender and what they're going to specify, and you can influence that so that you're the best solution, that's another approach to consider.
Yeah, and just to build on that point, very often, who's writing the tender? It's the SI partner, okay, who's writing the tender. Because look, SIs will say, hey, we are neutral, right? Because they're coming. I mean, you work with Accenture. They have Google practice or Microsoft, AWS. They don't work exclusively with anybody, right? So they say, hey, so this is where it comes to. So engaging with, and sometimes depending if it's a funded project, by the World Bank or ADB or USAID, the companies hire consultants, okay, who write the tender specs for the company or the agency or the government, right? And engaging with them, okay, is crucial, because look, if your solution's not even part of the tender, you don't even have a seat at the table, right? So that's key. And it again, this comes down to you going into the enterprise, you're selling big, you've got to do this whole stakeholder mapping, right? Spend the time to understand this, right? If it's going to tender, okay, who's writing the tender, right? Writing in the sense, which, okay, so it's this department. Okay, so if it's, let's say if it's consumer credit, I mean, the guy is not going to be, he's not going to writing, and nobody in their, team has probably written one. So they normally have perhaps an outside SI who's working on with them, and then that'll write the tender. Typically, we've seen that, right? We've seen it.
But for the early stage, should we keep the low-level deals until we have the enough capacity to support those cycles? Look, what is the point where you decide to switch?
You have to be opportunistic. There's no point, right? You get a $500,000 deal, go for it, because you have a proof point that says my solution, I sell to small business as well as large businesses, right? So initially, you've just got to be opportunistic. You've got to be opportunistic. You will kind of, as I say, stick it together with chewing gum and just make it happen, right? Everybody's all hands on deck making it happen, right? So I would, I don't know what stage you're in at, but I would absolutely be in this opportunistic mode if you're early stage. Right?
Yeah, but not losing sight of your ideal customer profile, though.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, because you don't want to deviate too much, because it might hurt you in the long run.
Fantastic. Now, I know that we talked about SI a little bit, right? And we also talked about how time-consuming working with SI could be, right? In our past experience, we have tried to work with Accenture, but it takes a lot of time, right? Other than Accenture, what are the other partners you could think about?
Yeah. So to think of regional and local, right? So let me say, so regional. Think of Dimension Data in Australia. Okay. They're a large partner, but they're not a global SI. Okay. Regional here, I say, okay, Singapore, NCS, classic example. Okay. Another one. So these are the kind of, I mean, and you got to kind of find who's the local SI here, right? Typically, they're the ones who would have done work with the bank, or they've done with the large conglomerates in the local conglomerates, right? It could be Accenture also, or it could be Accenture. They are. It takes a while. It takes a while to work with them, right? You're navigating this big corporate thing. So you look at SI. I would classify in 3 tiers. You have the global, okay. Then you have the regional, and then you have the local, right? And a lot of it is, look, a lot of it is on the web. You just go out there and start doing some just research to understand the profile, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so finding those local SIs and working with them is probably the most time efficient.
Yeah, but again, from an SI, so now when you look at working from an SI, what's in it for them, right?
Right.
For them is like, if you have a conversation about here's the front end and back end, it's like it's pointless. Okay, they don't care about that. It's like, what is the services revenue that they can generate, or what's the product, other products that go, or the solutions that go with your solutions, okay, from which they can from which they will earn services revenues, right? And so it's it's not that it's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem, okay. You've got to get the first SI interested, because here exactly, I'll tell you, because here's the situation, right? SI wants to say, show me the money, and typically, in more mature, like even like Microsoft, and perhaps even at Red Hat, you say, okay, hey, $1. I mean, you don't have stock because yours is open source, right? So Microsoft, it says, we have done studies that depending on the solution, says, okay, every $1 of Office 365 generates $5 in services revenue. Hey, how do we know that? Okay, because we've got a third party to talk to 50 of our top SIs who built practices around Office 365, right? Okay, so it's chicken and egg. So how do you get one interested? So you got to get one interested, okay, that's willing to take a bet on you. Okay, and then how do you get that? Okay, again, this comes back to the relationships that your VCs have, the relationships that you or your board members have, okay, and it comes down to that. And I tell you, I can tell you this, that even at Autodesk, so we've kind of transitioned from a perpetual model to a subscription model. Of course, we have a lot of partners who are been used to selling perpetual. We're trying to drive transformation. Now we're trying to recruit SIs, right? And we've just started. And the first thing SIs have been asking is, okay, so show me the revenue. Show me the, have you had any other SI who's done this? Okay. It's like, not yet, right? Okay, then come back to me with the proof point. Okay. And then you've just got to keep working through all of them, and somebody is going to bite. Okay, and that's exactly how, obviously I'm not at liberty to disclose who we're working with, but there's a very large SI working in Europe on a big, comes back to digitization of the workspace. Okay, saw that this thing fits in there, right? Our solution doesn't matter how much money I make out of Autodesk, for them it's the whole solution. Okay, it's the whole solution, right? And that's why I say, if your solution is complementary to a larger business problem that the SI is trying to solve, the easier it is to engage them. Because if it's a point solution, then they're saying, okay, if I'm going to do this work and only this piece, what am I going to make out of it, right? Okay, for them, you think of it as, they're managing bench time. Okay. And at the end of the day, it's like a law firm. I mean, the billable hours, right? They want to maximize their billable hours, right? And so they're looking at that. So they're looking at those parameters too. So I'm not saying it's an easy job. Okay, I just want to be prepared for the long slog. But once you have that in there, you will realize the fruits of the labor.
Sounds great. I know we needed to wrap it up at 5, but we kept going on because the discussion is really, really interesting, fascinating. So thanks a lot, John and Bharat. I don't know if we have any, any time left. I know John need to leave. Can we take one last question from the audience?
I mean, I can, but I also need to go pretty soon. Yeah.
Okay, it seems there are no questions at the moment, but hey, thanks a lot again, John and Bharat, for your time. I